everyone. Thank you for joining me today. So, as I've seen the reports and read the reports about what the King and Prince William are doing to the institutions, charities, people in the UK that are suffering such unbelievable financial crisis, I wanted to hear from somebody in Britain that I often listen to, and that is James O'Brien. And so I went and I listened to him, and I've included that in this broadcast to for you also to hear what he has to say with regards to this report coming out about the unbelievable greed and cruelty of these UK royals. So, following is James O'Brien's take on all of that.
One paragraph, one sentence even, from the Sunday Times yesterday, who have been working with Channel 4's Dispatches programme on an investigation into what they call the Duchy files. It's just, I mean, it is truly extraordinary. Over 5 months, we identified 5,410 land holdings, mineral rights, and properties held by the Duchy of Lancaster on behalf of the King and the Duchy of Cornwall for the Prince, and then examined business agreements and leases linked to these plots. I've lost the room, right? That's quite dull. Sounds a bit dry. Well, what's he doing? Just listen to this sentence. These contracts show the duchies generate profits by charging the army, the navy, hospitals, the prison service, schools, and councils for the right to use lands, rivers, and seashores seized for the duchies in medieval times. I have absolutely no idea what the phone-in is going to be today, but I felt that this was a story of such remarkable relevance to so much that we talk about together that it would be profoundly remiss of me not to discuss it today. These contracts show the duchies generate profits by charging the army and navy, hospitals, the prison service, schools, and councils for the right to use lands, rivers, and seashores seized for the duchies in medieval times. The Duchy of Lancaster raised, wait for it, £27.4 million for the King last year alone, while the Duchy of Cornwall raised a cool 23.6 for his oldest son. And this allows them to pay for their private homes, their personal income, and their staff. The annual declaration includes only very, very basic details of assets and activities in annual reports. I'll give you an example. Duchy of Lancaster has a deal with Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust in London that will charge the NHS. Think about the budget, the importance of raising more money for the NHS. The Duchy of Lancaster, as in the King's side hustle, will charge the NHS £11 million over the next 15 years for the right to park ambulances in one of its warehouses. The Duchy of Cornwall, which is Prince William's side hustle, receives rent for Dartmoor Prison in a contract under which the Ministry of Justice will pay £37 million. The reason I say I don't know, people are telling me not to forget the RNLI. I might allow a caller to bring that particular element of the story to our attention, because it's one of those stories that is almost impossible to get a proper grip on. The royal family are sold to us as paragons of patriotism, right? They are the very pinnacle of national pride. You cannot criticise the royal family without running a risk of being treasonous or being accused of treachery. So I don't know how naive it is to therefore presume that they would do more than everybody else to uphold the sort of values and indeed institutions that we consider to be crucial to our national infrastructure. I don't know off the top of your head what sort of institutions you'd put in that category. How about the army, the navy, hospitals, the prison service, schools and councils? You see, and this is probably the best way to convey the size of the story. So I read out those things and you see people and you see organisations that are dedicated to the public good, right? The army, the navy, hospitals, schools, councils, even the prison service. You make a list of those things, and ordinary people see them as things that we have to pay for the public good. Things that I suppose in a slightly less spent country we'd be proud to pay for. I'm glad that my taxes go towards the Navy. I'm glad that my taxes go towards the Army, the NHS, the education system, even the prison service. These are things to which we contribute in expectation we ever need them, or a social benefit should we not ever need them. King Charles and his son look at those organisations as profit, as potential profits. How much money? Do you think they compare notes over Christmas lunch? How much money did you make out of the NHS last year, Pops? It's just extraordinary. At least I think it is. I needed to give a quick shout to my mum, actually. I had to tell her that she's not actually going mad. I spoke to Mum on Friday after the show, and she said, I saw you on telly last night. And I said, no, you didn't. She said, you were in that Prince William homelessness documentary. I said, no, I wasn't. I categorically would remember if I'd contributed to a Prince William. And poor old Mum, she'd be sort of nodding off in front of the telly, began to wonder whether she dreamed the whole thing. It turns out I was in it. And I should have known. I was told about it months ago. But just a little clip of me reading out something from the chap that runs Republic, Graham, who runs Republic, and just pointing out that there's something, what's the word I want? There's something incongruous. That's a nice word, isn't it? There's something incongruous about Prince William, laudable though the impulse is, tasking himself with solving homelessness when he is taking £23.6 million from a duchy that generates profits by charging the army, the navy, hospitals, the prison service, schools and councils for access to property seized by his ancestors in medieval times. The other reason why I said I wasn't quite sure what phone we were going to have today is because I don't know quite what to say next. I don't want to draw too heavy parallels with Trump. But when you listen to Trump supporters and you realise there's nothing he can do that would shed support. Remember, he said himself, he understood this in a way that I don't think normal people ever could. He could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. I have a slightly unhealthy fascination with how far capped offers, forelock tuggers and client journalists will go to defend the indefensible. I'm not quite sure how you'd how would you even begin to defend this in a country that we've, if we didn't know already, then we've learnt since the budget last week, is in dire need of financial injection, dire need of public service spending, to discover that the people for whom we wave flags whenever they get married or have a baby are, siphoning epic sums of money from institutions and organisations which we support by either paying tax or donating. That's the bit I can't get my head around. Every single institution on this list, we support by either paying taxes or donating on our taxed income to charities like the RNLI. And these guys, they take money out of it. Now, I've told you before, and I will tell you again, historically, I'm not very good at royal phonemes. Right? But there have been some exceptions, I guess, in recent years. The old adage hasn't proved as true, or the old tradition hasn't proved as true. But I think this might be why, because this is so obviously egregious that you almost can't go there. This is an inequality so baked into our society that you can't quite imagine anything ever being different. Do you see what I mean? It's as if you're being presented with something so utterly hideous. Institutions that we support by paying tax and making donations. The king and his son are milking on an annual basis in return for an ancient privilege stolen during medieval times. And I wonder whether deep down we all know what the royal family represents. You know that hymn I got obsessed with a few years ago? Not the hymn itself, everyone likes all creatures great and small, but that little verse that no one knew about, or that we'd all forgotten about. The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. In an increasingly godless world, how do you keep this sort of inequality in place? You can just about understand how you get away with it by saying, oh no, I know it might look unfair to you, John, but it's what God wants. God ordered their estate. It might look a little bit unfair to you, lads, but hey, this is what Jesus would want, where he's still walking among us today. He likes his old kings. He likes it. I mean, the Bible doesn't really support the idea, but you can just about see how the fear of eternal damnation or whatever else it might be. The problem is that I don't like the way this story is reaching me. I don't like the way my mind is going this morning. I don't like being the person that points out how ridiculous and miserable and hideously unfair this whole thing is, which is why I've said now 4 times I don't quite know what the phoning is. I think it's this. It's why have we, even if you're not a massive Republican or a massive Royalist, why have we got such a problem with criticism of the royal family? Let's do that first. 0345 6060 Do you know what I really want to do? I want to do that thing that I hardly ever do on the programme, which is essentially just lick my finger, stick it in the air and see which way the wind is blowing. I think, let me go straight in on this, I think this is one of the grimmest things I've ever read about my country. In the context of no laws being broken, something that's happening in plain sight all of the time, I can't quite believe that I'm reading about these sums of money being trousered for essentially just owning stuff, land holdings, mineral rights, properties, but taking money from organisations and institutions that the rest of us support by... I'm going to keep saying this, I can't get past it. When was the last time you made a donation to a charity? When's the last time you signed a cheque for your income tax if you're self-employed, or looked at your pay slip and balked at the amount of money making its way to the Treasury? You know my view on this. My view is quite rightly. But the king and the heir to the throne look at all of these organisations and see pound signs. So I want to do that thing I never do, which is ask you how disgusting you think this is. 0345 6060 They are completely taking... I even want to say the rude word here. I won't, because Keith will have a moment. They are absolutely taking the mickey. This is completely indefensible, right? Normally you'd wheel out some has-been from the old royal lobby and they'd start talking about, well, imagine if, I don't know, John Major was president. How would you feel about... I mean, a meaningless argument in the context of whether or not this is epically unfair. Well, it's the best of the bad sis. Other countries have got rid of their royals. They're lobbing mud at the Spanish royal family this weekend when they turned up at the scene of the floods we were talking about on Friday. But do you ever get this feeling that something is so impenetrably awful that you don't know where to start? That's the only reason I drew a parallel with Trump. It's like, well, how do you start? How can anybody not think this is outrageous? How can anybody see a headline, list of properties that earn millions for top royals, and you think to yourself, oh, that's fair enough, probably renting out a few palaces on Airbnb or something. And you read what the properties are, and you learn that they're charging the army, the navy, hospitals, the prison service, schools and councils for the right to use lands, rivers and seashore seized for the duchies in medieval times. We've not changed at all, have we? If King Charles wanted to chop his wife's head off because he suspected she was having an affair, there'd be people in my profession who'd wave that through as well. I'd be perfectly reasonable. He's a king, after all. She should have kept her knickers on. It's absolutely extraordinary, this level of deference. And it takes a Rupert Murdoch newspaper to do it. Murdoch, as ever, knows exactly where his bread is buttered, but I think in his bones he's probably a Republican, don't you? Probably thinks he should be king. Kind of practically is. You look at what's been visited upon the country as a consequence of his power and influence. It's just jaw-dropping.